Every evening, when darkness falls and your head touches the pillow, you cross a threshold into something unknown. For more than 300,000 years, human beings have repeated this single ritual, night after night after night.
And yet, modern researchers are only just beginning to piece together what truly unfolds in those hours of darkness. And the truth is far stranger than most people realize.
Here's the thing. Almost everything you think you know about sleep is incomplete. We've been taught that sleep is downtime. The brain switches off, the body does some maintenance, end of story. But what if that picture is completely wrong? What if your mind is actually more alive at night, more receptive, more switched on than when you're walking around in the middle of the day?
To find the answer, we need to travel backwards, far backwards, before alarm clocks existed, before electric light, before anyone slept on a mattress, before humans even lived under a roof.
The way our ancestors slept bears almost no resemblance to the way we sleep now. And the proof? Buried in ancient manuscripts, preserved in isolated communities, and confirmed by a strange experiment deep underground, might fundamentally reshape how you approach tonight.
For millennia, the human sleep cycle had two distinct chapters. A historian named Roger Ekirch uncovered something remarkable. More than 500 separate references scattered across centuries, mentioning a phenomenon people called first sleep and second sleep. He found them in personal journals, legal documents, medical manuscripts, literature stretching all the way from classical Greece to 18th century Europe.
Here's how it worked. People would retire shortly after sunset. They'd rest for about 4 hours. This was the first sleep. Then, somewhere around the middle of the night, something extraordinary occurred. They would open their eyes. Not for a quick moment, not to use the bathroom. They would rise into full wakefulness for an hour or even 2.
And this interval, this strange window wedged between two sleeps, was nothing like what we experience today. In those hours, people engaged in practices that feel almost mystical to us now. Some would lie motionless and explore their dreams, believing they contained divine messages or visions of things yet to happen. Some would pray. Others would enter deep meditative stillness. Husbands and wives would speak openly in the blackness, revealing thoughts they'd never dare express in daylight. A few would step outside and visit nearby friends. Some wrote letters by candle flame. Others read. And yes, physical intimacy was common too. Physicians of the era actually advised couples that the interval after first sleep was the most fertile window for conceiving a child. This wasn't some European eccentricity. It wasn't limited to one culture or continent. The Temne of Sierra Leone, the Tiv in Nigeria, the Zuni across New Mexico, indigenous communities in Madagascar.
Anthropologists have recorded the identical rhythm everywhere they looked. First sleep, quiet wakefulness. Second sleep. This was quite simply how human beings were wired to rest. So what broke the pattern? Why did we abandon this ancient rhythm? It comes down to a single technology, the electric light bulb. Once artificial illumination arrived, nighttime was never the same. Darkness, which had been non-negotiable for every generation before us, suddenly became something you could override. People could now work into the evening, socialize after sunset, push past the hour when every previous human had accepted the arrival of night.
But here is the truly astonishing part. When scientists studied what happens to modern people when you take away every source of man-made light, the old pattern resurfaces with almost unsettling accuracy.
Back in the 1990s, a psychiatrist named Thomas Wehr designed a now legendary study. He placed volunteers in complete darkness for 14 hours daily, across an entire month. No lamps allowed, no screens, no phones, nothing but absolute blackness.
For the first several days, everyone slept the way we all do now. One solid stretch of unconsciousness. But after about 3 weeks, something flipped. One by one,
every participant began splitting their sleep into two separate blocks, divided by a waking interval of 1 to 2 hours.
Their biology had remembered a rhythm their ancestors had followed for thousands of generations. And in that waking gap, Wehr detected something remarkable in his participants' bodies. Their pituitary glands were flooding the bloodstream with unusually high amounts of prolactin.
This is a chemical linked to profound tranquility, to meditative absorption, to the deep, floating serenity that Buddhist practitioners spend decades training to reach.
These volunteers weren't just lying awake. They had slipped into a neurological condition that almost no modern person ever experiences. Utterly serene, turned inward, awake but not vigilant, aware but not actively thinking. This is the space where human consciousness took shape.
Sit with this for a moment. Across nearly the entire span of human existence, every single night, every man, woman, and child on this planet drifted into this twilight realm between waking and sleep.
It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't broken sleep. It wasn't insomnia. It was the operating system our brains evolved to run on. And in barely 150 years, a heartbeat on the evolutionary timeline, we erased it altogether. So here's the question worth losing sleep over, or more precisely, worth waking up in the middle of the night to contemplate. What vanished when that quiet hour between sleeps disappeared? A growing number of researchers now suspect the loss may be far more profound than anyone first guessed. You've almost certainly felt traces of this yourself. Opening your eyes at 3 in the morning, brain suddenly alert, can't seem to drift back under. We call it insomnia these days. We check our phones in frustration, we fret about being exhausted tomorrow, we frame it as a malfunction that needs medical correction. But what if it's not broken at all? What if that 3 a.m. alertness is your neurology attempting to reclaim a beat it followed for 300,000 years? Research now confirms that the sleeping brain moves through very different phases. The earlier portion of the night is dominated by deep, slow-wave sleep. This is when tissues repair, when the physical body restores itself. The later portion brings longer stretches of REM. This is emotional repair. Memory gets sorted. Mood gets recalibrated. The hour of quiet wakefulness was the corridor connecting these two separate rooms. It was the passageway. And without that corridor, several sleep scientists now argue we may be disrupting an essential psychological function. And there's one more layer to this, one that might be the strangest of all, a layer you've tasted yourself, but perhaps never stopped to examine. Have you ever awoken carrying the solution to a problem that had been tormenting you for days? An answer so clear, it felt like a gift, a creative spark from nowhere, a locked door suddenly swinging open. That is not random chance.
In the boundary zone between wakefulness and sleep, which researchers call the hypnagogic state, your brain shifts into an entirely different operating mode. The prefrontal cortex, the part that handles logic and self-censorship, powers down significantly.
While a separate network in the brain, the one tied to imagination, to forging unexpected links, to consolidating scattered memories, lights up like a switchboard. Thomas Edison figured this out through instinct. He would grip steel ball bearings and settle into a chair. As his body began to surrender to sleep, his fingers would loosen, the balls would clatter to the floor, and the noise would jolt him awake. He would immediately write down every thought that had surfaced. He referred to this as his genius gap. Salvador Dali did something nearly identical. Instead of steel balls, he held a heavy key. The instant the key dropped, he'd grab his brushes and paint the surreal visions that had floated up from the border of sleep. Beethoven, Nikola Tesla, Aristotle, all of them described this same ritual, actively chasing that liminal moment between sleeping and waking to harvest creative insights that never appeared during ordinary consciousness. It almost sounds too poetic to accept. We gave all of that away. The honest conversations in the blackness, the sudden breakthroughs, the silent reflection, a neurological dimension that human beings refined across hundreds of thousands of years. We traded every piece of it for a switch on the wall. So tonight, if you find yourself staring at the ceiling at 3 in the morning, don't grab your device. Don't resist it. Don't treat it like something broken. Just remain still in the darkness. And perhaps
just perhaps, you'll stumble upon something in that quiet space every generation before us already understood.